Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Cam, and today I want to start with a scene that plays out in workplaces all over the world, far too often. Picture this. It's the middle of the night shift in a massive, cold warehouse. A forklift operator is backing up, there's a loud crunch, and next thing you know, he's on the concrete with his right leg absolutely shattered. Now, what's the very first thing that happens when the bosses run down from the air-conditioned office? They look at the bloke on the ground, look at the forklift, and go, well, there you have it. Operator error. He should have been looking where he was going. Write him up, send him for a drug test, and let's get back to work. I call this the who did it trap. And let me tell you, after decades in the incident investigation game, it is the absolute favourite sport of lazy investigators and panicked managers alike. It's incredibly seductive, isn't it? Because if you can just blame the last person who touched the machine, your job is done. You don't have to look at the systems, you don't have to look at the budget, and you certainly don't have to look in the mirror. But here's the absolute truth of the matter, and I'll keep screaming this from the rooftops until I retire. Human error is not the cause of an incident. It's a symptom. It's the starting point of an investigation, not the finish line. When you jump straight to, he made a mistake, and wrap up your little report, you are actively shutting down any chance of your organisation actually learning something. You're just putting a band-aid on a systemic cancer. The moment we stop asking who did it and start asking why did it make sense for them to do what they did, that is the exact moment we actually start doing real safety work. Now, how do we escape that trap? Well, first off, you have to accept that your gut feeling is a bloody terrible investigator. Your gut is lazy. It loves shortcuts, it loves confirmation bias, and it loves finding a scapegoat so it can go home early and have a beer. To break that bias, we need structure. In the ICAM world, we rely on a framework we call PEEPO. It stands for People, Environment, Equipment, Procedures, and Organisation. It's a structured way of gathering data that forces you to look at the entire landscape, not just the bloke at the sharp end. Let me give you an example of how this works in practice. Think about a high-voltage electrician working on a solar farm project. He terminates some heavy-duty underground cables, but during commissioning, there's zero continuity. Turns out, the cables were completely misidentified and terminated into the wrong cubicles. If you trust your gut, you'll say, stupid Sparky didn't label his cables. Case closed. But when you apply the PEEPO process, you start laying out the facts. Under people, sure, you have the electrician. But under environment, you discover there was a massive concrete footing poured right in the middle of the planned cable route, forcing them to redirect things on the fly. Under equipment, you find out the multimeter was fine, but there were no labels provided. Under procedures, you realize the subcontractor was only given a loose verbal brief instead of a detailed written scope of work. And under organisation, you find out the contract was awarded purely on cost. The timeline was squeezed to the absolute limit, and there was zero engineering oversight on site because of travel restrictions. Suddenly, that careless mistake by the Sparky doesn't look so simple, does it? The system practically designed that failure and handed it to him on a silver platter. That's why we use PEEPO Mark I to plan what data we need to find, and PEEPO Mark II to separate the actual contributing factors from the background noise. It forces us to ask, why did the system make this mistake? The logical, easiest choice for the worker at that exact moment. Once you've done the hard work of gathering the data, you run into the next massive hurdle, the seduction of the easy fix. This is where most investigations go to die. You've probably seen these reports. The corrective actions are always some variation of retrain the worker, update the policy, or my personal favourite, tell everyone to be more careful at the next toolbox talk. What absolute rubbish. Those aren't corrective actions, they're administrative get-out-of-jail-free cards. If your solution to a major incident is telling someone to pay more attention, you haven't fixed a single thing. You've just shifted the liability back onto the frontline staff. We have to understand the hierarchy of controls. If you look at how we manage risk, administrative controls and personal protective equipment are at the absolute bottom of the food chain. They are the least effective. Why? Because they rely entirely on human perfection. And guess what? Humans are never, ever going to be perfect. If you want real change, you have to look higher up the chain. We need engineering controls, substitution, or elimination. We need to focus on designing the game so it's harder to fail, rather than just yelling at the players when they do. But that's hard, isn't it? It costs money, it takes time, and it directly challenges the boardroom myths. A lot of companies love to plaster zero harm on their hard hats and posters, but then they turn around and set unrealistic deadlines that force workers to take shortcuts just to keep their jobs. You cannot demand safety first with your mouth, while your schedule demands production first with your wallet. It's a massive contradiction, and as investigators, we have to be brave enough to call it out. And that brings us to the real test of an investigator. It's not just about knowing how to use the ICAM codes or how to draw a timeline. It's about courage. Sooner or later, every investigator faces a defining moment. You'll be sitting at your desk, looking at the evidence, and the path of cause and effect will lead you somewhere highly uncomfortable, somewhere politically sensitive. It might point to a lack of resources approved by the executive team, or a complete failure of the management of change process by a highly respected senior manager. And the pressure will start. You'll get the gentle taps on the shoulder, people saying, "Mate, do we really need to include that organisational column in the final report? Can't we just focus on the operator's decision-making? It makes the company look bad." That is the moment that defines you. Do you package up a clean, politically safe story that keeps the executives happy? Or do you hold the line on the evidence? If you choose convenience over truth, you aren't an investigator anymore. You're just a corporate myth maker. And worse, you're leaving a trap active for the next worker to step into. We need to build a true, just culture. A culture where we draw a clear line between honest, systemic mistakes and actual reckless behaviour. James Reason talked about this extensively. If someone makes an error because of poor procedures, bad design, or exhaustion, we don't punish them, we fix the system. But we can only do that if we have the courage to present the facts exactly as they are. So next time you're on site and something goes wrong, don't ask who did it. Step back, take a breath, trust the process, and have the courage to ask why. That's all for today's Corner. Stay safe out there, look after your mates, and I'll catch you next time.